welcome to the BCAT Election Center for the 2021 Burlington Town Election. We're going to have a series of debates and forums with the candidates up for election. And with me today is Town Clerk Amy Warfield, who is looking for a third term. Amy does have an opponent on the ballot, Joseph Welch. However, despite our repeated attempts to get in touch with him, he did not respond and agreed to come participate here today. So we're just going to be doing a one-on-one forum to let you, the audience, know why Amy is seeking to run for a third term. Amy, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you, Rich.
So let's just start off right at the top with that question. What made you decide that you wanted another 5 years in this position?
Well, the town clerk job is a job I love. It's been my privilege to serve the people of Burlington, whether it's a business or residents. And there's still a lot of exciting things to do. The job is never dull or boring. It changes quite a bit. And so I feel like I still have a lot to contribute to those changes.
And what do you see as the key roles of the town clerk position?
Well, that's an interesting one. I think the main role of the town clerk is to be responsive to people's requests, whether, again, that comes from a business, whether that comes from another department, whether that comes from a resident. It's all the person asking the question and looking for the information. It's important to them, and that's what we have to respond to. Now, inside that, we have different areas that we have to handle, things like elections or zoning and building information, or whether public requests. So it's a wide variety of things that people are looking for that we try to be very responsive. Customer service has always been one of my big key points that we work very hard on.
Now, I know everyone sees you, like you mentioned, at the elections. But are there parts of the position that maybe people would be surprised to find out, that kind of falls under your responsibilities?
Well, one of the major things is the whole records management area. People don't understand, I think, how much information, data, records we do have until they're looking for it. And it comes down to, people might be looking for birth certificates or marriage certificates or death certificates. That's a personal thing to them. I've had a question recently, even when somebody asks me, well, I'm looking for a marriage certificate, but it's way back in the 60s. I don't know if you'd have that. And I said, well, of course we do. We have all the records back to 1904 when the town hall burned. And we have some of them prior to that had been saved. So it's that depth of information. I get lots of requests. Every week we get public record requests for information about building or even just meetings. People looking for, do you have the minutes from a meeting back in the 80s or the 90s? So that's one of the biggest things I think that surprises people.
And I know that you have a staff there and you work. How do you feel that the office has been running since you've been there?
Well, like with every office, there are ups and downs, but I think we're a very strong unit. We're very good working. I've now got people who are very well trained in their jobs. And we're even at the point where we can do some cross-training so that there is support for different functions. The team I have is just really excellent. And I think that that's one of the things that last year got us through all the COVID stuff, as well as the multiple elections that we did have.
Yeah, that was going to be an upcoming question, is how did the last year sort of impact the role of town clerk and everyone in the office?
Well, I think one of the things was that we all learned more and more how to be flexible, because you just never knew what changes might be coming, what requirements might be made of us from the fact of what Board of Health was telling us or what the governor might be issuing. And then also dealing with the elections, there was a lot of fluidity in how we ran the elections. For instance, that we moved our local election from April to June, And then we had to deal with a town meeting, which the first one we ran outside because we couldn't kind of really be meeting at all inside at that point. And so my staff and myself, we would have a lot of meetings to say, okay, this is what's changing. How are we going to do that? How are we going to work through things? Dealing with the elections, we went from having we had at our regular absentee ballots, which usually is about 400 or 500 for an election, to having 8,000 vote by mail ballots for the presidential election.
Wow.
So just figuring out, looking at how we do it and how we have to do it to have the controls that we need, and then how do we magnify that and make it tenfold in a very short period of time. So that was one of the keys, flexibility.
Yeah, it was definitely a strange year.
Yeah.
And how do you see it, in the next couple of years going forward? Do you think we'll more, still be doing all the elections differently and town meeting differently, or do you think hopefully we'll get back to normal? How do you see, the office sort of evolving the next couple of years?
Yeah. Well, I think with elections, there is a lot of change coming, mainly because of the things that were instituted during COVID to make it more flexible, like the vote by mail, like early voting. So those changes will continue, but all of that has to be controlled by legislation. That's one of the places where, as a clerk, I'm responsible, and my office is responsible for kind of adhering to about 400 rules, regulations, and laws. And so we have to work inside those. So that's going to be one thing, that is just keeping up on what the new legislation is in terms of elections. I think the other thing, in terms of town meeting, we really are working very hard to get back to a more normal town meeting. One of the foundations of town meeting, of course, is the in-person interchange of the representatives being able to discuss and talk about issues on the floor. And although you can do some of that with virtual, it's just different than being in person. So I think very strongly, I want to work back to getting town meeting kind of back to normal. The other areas I think that we're going to be dealing with in the future too is budgeting, and just budgets are going to have to change. The economy is going to change, and we haven't yet seen those changes due to COVID. But I think that's going to be affecting us for the next maybe 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, a lot of discussion about FY22 already going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned, all of the rules and regulations. I think you dropped the number 400. So how does one prepare for taking the role of town clerk? What did you have a similar experience before you started? Was it mostly on the job training? Like how did it work for you?
Well, I actually started working in town when we moved here in the 80s and getting involved with things. I was on the board of library trustees. I was also a town meeting member. So I had a pretty good idea of kind of how a department worked, and things like, how did you put together a budget, and what did you have to do to adhere to that budget? And then being a town meeting member, I was on the other side. I was the one looking at, what are these people asking for, and what should we be doing, and what kind of services do we need to provide for the money that's being asked for. And then I also had worked for myself and worked in private industry for about 20 years. And then when I came to work in the clerk's office, I started off being kind of the support person in terms of dealing with technology, but started to see, what are all the rules and regulations that you have to adhere to? Things like, open meeting law and conflict of interest and all of those things. And one of the nice pieces working in the clerk's office is there is the opportunity for a lot of additional learning. The Clerks Association, working through the Mass Municipal Association, you can take a lot of classes, but I think for me, it's been a process of learning all those things over the past 15 years.
All right. Now, like I said, you do have a challenger on the ballot, and this is, an election thing that. So, just what would you say to voters to encourage them to come out? One, to vote. I know you're always, big on that.
Reminding you when elections are.
And then, but more to come out and check your name on April 10th.
Okay. I think one of the differences is I feel that I have the experience and the leadership, having been in the job for 10 years, and also the dedication and the service to the community and to the people of Burlington that makes the big difference between myself and the other candidate.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and spending some time with us. I'd also like to thank everybody for watching, and please remember to go out and vote. Early votings, I got the expert right here, but starts on April 5th at Grandview Farm, goes up through that Thursday, and then there's absentee ballot on Friday, and then the election is Saturday, April 10th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the Burlington High School Gymnasiums. Did I get all that right, Amy?
That's correct. Thank you, Rich.
All right, thank you.